Welcome, Jagdeep, for the interview, and thanks for joining in. So I've got your CV in front of me, and so I would like you to start off with your introduction, what you have done in the past, and then we can continue on that.
Sure. Yeah. Hey, Saurabh. Good morning. I have a total 8 years of experience in IT. I started as a software engineer trainee in Infosys in 2015. So at that time, I was trained in Java, Python, DBMS, and building a 3-tier application. So that transformed into the systems engineer role, where I was a backend developer in Java, and I used to develop applications using TDD, that is test-driven development approach, and also do the automated testing using Selenium and quality testing using SonarQube. Further, I moved to senior systems engineer role, where I was actually working in the IAM domain, which is identity and access management domain. So here we work with two tools, SailPoint and SiteMinder. So basically, I learned about authentication and authorization here, and how to manage those aspects for all the users for that bank for that client. Further, I moved to technology analyst role, but my DevOps career actually started at senior systems engineer role, where I built a CI/CD pipeline on my own. That was the first CI/CD pipeline in our legacy system. So from there, I implemented the CI/CD pipeline, talked to the SMEs, used my knowledge, and built a prototype for one of the environments of our application, and showcased it to the senior manager. And it actually reduced our deployment time from 2 days to 2 hours, and also reduced the manual errors. So that was really I got an award for that, for being proactive. So from there, I switched to cloud, and I started with my first, I self-learned the cloud, and I passed my first certification, which was AWS Cloud Practitioner certification, and I got the cloud project through internal job posting. There I was managing the infrastructure on AWS, and also the cloud native applications and their deployments on the AWS platform. Further, I moved to Accenture, where I was working as the cloud support engineer. So here we were mainly the infrastructure support team for the bank client, which was RBS. And we worked on resolving any incidents that arised in the non-production environments, responding to the incidents within the SLA. And with the infrastructure in AWS, we were also handling the Airflow DAX, because we were handling the data pipelines. Then we were also resolving any issues with the TeamCity CI/CD pipelines, which were deployed on TeamCity. So all the operations and infrastructure part was being handled by us. And further, in my most recent position, I was working as a cloud DevOps consultant. So here it is a startup organization. So I was one of the first hires, and I managed the DevOps and the cloud team. So here we were building a product which was like a hiring board, a hiring platform from the scratch. So building that infrastructure from the scratch, and then as the application got bigger, we implemented the infrastructure using Terraform, and then also the application delivery format changed into containers, and we were managing the containers through Kubernetes. So this is basically what this is the journey that I have been through. And now I'm just learning DevOps. I'm also ramping up on DevOps. I'm also ramping up on the other clouds like Azure and GCP. And yeah, that's it, I think. Thank you.
Cool. Awesome. I think that was a fantastic description of what you have done so far. Now, tell me something about Kubernetes. So you said that you worked on Kubernetes. You're managing a team of 6 people, the comprehensive infrastructure deployments. Tell me, why would you use Kubernetes? What are the advantages that it gives you? And also, what do you understand on the different components in Kubernetes?
So basically, Kubernetes is a container orchestration tool. So we moved from the large applications to microservices, and microservices, they can be deployed using containers because because they are very decoupled in nature. So we can have various one particular container for one microservice, and we can deploy them using the containers. So managing all these containers in the application, that is done through Kubernetes. Kubernetes has two major, it's a master slave kind of architecture. So in the master, we have various components like the controllers, and then the controllers like the ingress controller, service controllers, then etcd, which is a backup database for handling, um, for tracing all the activities, so keeping that temporary data. We have etcd. Then we have to expose the container service, we have api server. So our service in the Kubernetes, that is exposed through the api server. And we have one more component in master. I'm forgetting that, but yeah, this is in the master. And in the slave, we have kubeproxy and kubelets and the container engine. So container engine is deployed on each slave node. And then kubelet is for managing which container goes where, and kubeproxy is for the communication between the various containers and the nodes. And the yeah.
Okay.
And the smallest part of the Kubernetes cluster is a pod. So in pod, we can have we can have one or more containers as well.
Okay, all right. So in terms of Kubernetes, you have said that you have managed Kubernetes. So what is the size of the infrastructure that you have managed there? And you said that you have a team of six.
Yeah. So at the moment, like our application was not that big. So initially we started with manual deployment of our application, because it was just like one service or two services. But as it grew, so we moved to containerization, and then we moved to the Kubernetes cluster, like EKS cluster on the Amazon. So we had approximately 10 services at that time. So like for various containers for those 10 services.
Right. And so if you are to deploy a new service in Kubernetes, can you tell me the steps as to how you would deploy it?
Sure. So for the Kubernetes, firstly, we'll have to create an EKS, like we were using EKS. So we used to create the EKS cluster. Then firstly, we would create a deployment.yaml file. So that will tell us which container to deploy. Then we had service.yaml file. So that would tell, like, on various nodes, we can have the containers for that service. So the service would cover all the containers which are exposing that service. So that would be the second YAML. And the third would be ingress.yaml. So that will do the load balancing for the, that would be kind of external load balancer for our service. So that will expose our service. So these three YAML files would be created for each service. And then we'll do EKS-CTL deploy the deployment.yaml, then ingress and the ingress.yaml, and then deployment.yaml, service.yaml, and then ingress.yaml, and then we will try to hit the URL that we have for that service. So we can see all this on the AWS console as well. So if we go inside our various components of the cluster, so like the various services, we would be able to see the HTTPS link, and then we would try to test our application. And if any changes, we can again deploy our service.
Okay. So do you know what are the three types of services that are available in Kubernetes?
Services in the sense?
So there are three types of services in Kubernetes. Do you know what these are?
Not sure on that.
Okay, all right. Now you said that you have managed a team of around 6 people.
Mhm.
Tell me about what sort of management was required. Would you So you said that you have managed a team of 6, streamlining a comprehensive infrastructure using Kubernetes, Docker. So tell me about what that team used to do. Was it that solely on for infrastructure, or was it application oriented as well?
And no, so we had a different development team, so that was application oriented. So
Mhm.
they would deploy, they would push their code on the GitHub repository, and from there we would pick up the code and deploy it on the AWS platform. So for that deployment, also we would create the AWS infrastructure. So for the front end, we were like initially we were using S3 bucket, like we were statically hosting a website on S3 bucket. So we were exposing the S3 with CloudFront and with Route 53. So in CloudFront, we were using the HTTPS certificate as a certification as well to provide the security, and then exposing it using Route 53. And for the backend, we were using like one EC2 instance, and that was two EC2 instances that was exposed like that was back at the back end of a load balancer, and at load balancer we were providing the SSL certification, and then again exposed using Route 53. But later on for the backend we moved to the EKS clusters and managing the backend using containers.
Okay, all right. Now I see that you are targeting towards a cloud operations role, probably a
Mhm.
senior sort of role in it, a cloud operations manager. So can you tell me about what do you understand by site reliability engineering?
So I think that means that the site should be highly available and should be able to recover, self-heal itself in case of disaster, so that the disaster recovery mechanism should be there. And like what we were doing, that we were monitoring our applications, and we were also like for the performance, we were doing CloudWatch metric, CloudWatch logs, and CloudWatch alarms if our ideal situation was not met. So we would take actions like Lambda functions, or like mailing to the support team that we might have this issue and this system is in critical state. So we would immediately go to the infrastructure and look through the logs and fix it right away. If like we would do automation wherever possible, but if not, we would send the alarms to the operations team so that they are available on backend call.
Okay. Uh, have you heard of these terms SLI, SLO, and SLA?
Yes.
Can you tell me?
So
Yeah.
Mhm. Sorry. So service level indicators, service level agreement, and service level objectives. So indicator is to define which indicators should be met. The indicators that define the quality of the application and the standard of the application. SLA, that is the agreement within which the incident which is reported that should be resolved, and SLO, that is the end objective of the response that we have provided, and it should be met so that like the customer is satisfied with the response.
Right. And how do you measure each of them?
Like we have defined various indicators in SLA, like when we have meetings with the external stakeholders, with the client. So we have defined them specifically in the statement of purpose documents, the statement of the work
My
documents.
question is, you have an application. How would
Uh-huh.
you, how would you define how much is the SLO for it?
Okay.
So you have been running an
So
application. You have been running an application for, let's say, 6 months. Uh,
mhm.
if somebody asks you what is the SLO for it, how would you measure it?
So like we were building a hiring platform. So for that, our SLO, like what we defined was that um, the customer should be able, so it's like
All right, let me rephrase
the
it. Let me rephrase it.
Mhm,
You have an application, and
mhm,
you explained me the terms SLI, SLO, and SLA.
mhm.
How would you know that your SLA has not been hit? You would know by measuring the service level objective where it currently stands. How would you know
Okay.
where does it stand that you have not hit
Mhm.
the SLA?
So like in Accenture, we were as part of the support team. So for production, our SLA response time would have was 2 hours. So if we are not able to resolve that incident in 2 hours in production, then it would be escalated to the next our next manager, and then other team members, like it was cross-functional team. So developers team would also get involved. So I think that is the SLA. If you're not able to do it in resolve it and test it, that the application is running, then it would be a breach of the contract.
Agreed.
And,
You got the SLA. How would the SLO?
mhm.
How would you know what your SLO is at the moment
Uh,
in an application?
so I think the end objective that would be to uh, keep keep that application up and running. So
There's
once,
a number that you can assign to SLO, whether it's
okay.
99, where you are at this stage, whether you are at an SLO point, are you 97, are you 99, or are you 98? How do you calculate that?
um, I'm
It's
not
fine if you
sure
don't
on
know.
that.
It's fine
Yeah.
if you don't know. All right.
Mhm.
Uh, Tell me about what's the difference between an RTO and RPO?
So RTO is time recovery objective and RPO is recovery point objective. So recovery point objective, it will like an incident has happened and the recent backup that we have. So that would be the point from where we can recover. Till that point we can recover our data. So the data loss that happens between that last backup and the when the failure happened, that is the RPO, so the latest backup and the data that we can recover. And RTO is like when the failure has happened and when we are able to recover our system. So that time lapse between them, that is the RTO. And it should be you can define a term for that, and it should like there is also MTTR, so maximum time to recovery. So after that it would be actually like escalation, and that's the max time you can bear the system to be down, but you have to recover it within that maximum time.
Okay. Now, let's assume you have an application, and
Mhm.
so it's a standalone web application, and
Mhm.
you are asked to make that application highly available. But also,
Okay.
you have to keep in mind that the application should be accessible at in multiple geographies
Mhm.
by multiple different clients. There shouldn't be any latency. It should have a high available database,
Mhm.
and it should be failure resistant when it comes to your business logic part. Also, your application should have a very strict security controls.
Okay.
And what and after you explain me the application, tell me about what are the cost effective features that you have kept in mind.
Okay. Um, so to make our application highly available, so firstly, we can keep the backups. We can take snapshots of our application. For the database, like AWS RDS, that has a read replica and a standby instance. So whenever there is a failure in the main RDS instance, so always AWS is maintaining that high availability already, and it is like there's a failover to that standby cluster. So that is synchronous replication of your database. so that we can use that feature. For the security feature, our clusters should follow the principle of least privilege. So we should keep our instances, the security group of our instances, of our EC2 instances only receive traffic from the load balancers. We can provide NACLs to limit our access. We can, like, after that, we can also use various other features of AWS, like for the security purpose, we can use inspector. So it will keep you guiding on what are the where you have vulnerabilities in your security features. So we can always fix them. We can also use guard duty, and for the web, for the DDoS attacks, we can use AWS Shield. So there are various services, but yes, they will cost us. So keeping all this in mind, we can also use AWS. AWS Inspector has 5 features. So it also tells you about cost optimization. So where you can cut the cost. So you can either turn that on, or you can always, before implementing anything, look for the pricing. So AWS has provided us AWS pricing calculator. So we can always add on the services, the size of the instances of the clusters, and in the clusters. So we can always have that approximate pricing in our hand before implementing, and during implementation as well. Like, we were maintaining the cost pack. So like, we were comparing it for the past 3 months. So if there is an increase in this month, so we would do a deep interrogation into what happened extra this month. So we would always try to pinpoint where the extra cost went, so we can minimize on that if it's not required, or we can use another best practice.
In terms of your high availability, what's the difference between a region and a zone?
So a region, that is a geographical location, like a vast geographical location, and within that we have availability zones. So in one region we can have multiple availability zones. So like in US we have 6 availability zones. So each availability zone will have its own data center, and each data center will have separate electricity, like all the infrastructure would be separate, so that failure in one data center does not affect the other.
Okay. And so with the application that you just mentioned, would you like to make it highly available within regions or highly available within zones?
Within regions, actually.
And why?
Because if we have globally distributed users, we would like to distribute our data through across regions. And also, if entire region goes down, or there's any natural calamity in that region, so we always should have a backup in the other region, which is not so that it's not affected. Our data is always secure in some other part of the world.
Okay. And do you think making highly available region is more expensive than making highly available zoning?
Yes, definitely. The costing for replication of data across region is more than within the zone in AWS.
All right. So when I asked you this question earlier, I said that there are some costing points that you'll have to ensure, and probably when you are answering these questions, so you should say that you will have to analyze whether the requirements need to be for region or not. But okay.
Okay.
All right. Now tell me the difference between. Okay, tell me what is a NACL?
So that is network access control list. So it is like It has allow and deny rules, and it is a traffic controller for our subnet. Sorry.
What's the difference
So
between NACLs and your security groups?
security groups, they are stateful, so they do not have deny option. Whatever traffic, like all the traffic is allowed out of the instance. But for the NACLs, it is stateless until and unless we tell which traffic should go out of the subnet, it will not send the traffic out. Secondly, security groups, they are at the instance level, EC2 instance level, and the NACLs, they are at the subnet level. Each EC2 instance can have multiple security groups, but the NACL that will all the instances which are in that subnet, they will have that the same NACL. Then yeah, I think that's it.
Okay. All right. Now the next set of questions, I'm done with the technical questions, but the next set of questions that I want to understand is what sort of leadership depth that you have, because you intend to go towards a leadership role. Tell me about a time when you handled a crisis.
Okay. So while I was in this most recent role in the startup, like our product, it had went live, but after a few days, like we were on the support, on the call, on call support, but after some days the application faced some issue regarding the like the site was getting 502 errors. So what, like it was in production for a couple of days only, and we had to keep it up and running. So we instantly got together and started debugging why it's happening. So we got to know in the end that actually it is because the target group does not have right targets, does not have appropriate targets there. So we checked that the load balancer had deemed our EC2 instances unhealthy. So we checked in our application code as well. So the 200 OK that was added in the status health in the health check status code, that 200 OK that would be there, but 302 and 301 was also OK for us. So we added that status code in the health check for the load balancer, and after that our application worked. So that was like we were not aware of it, but we instantly got together and tried debugging and doing like researching on Google why 502 is coming. So, but we got to the resolution in 2 hours.
Okay. And were any of the stakeholders impacted?
Yes, we did get few mailers from our angel investors that the application, your product is not responding properly. So we had to respond very quickly to it.
Okay.
But it was not major impact, but yes, it was a learning for us as well.
Right. Now, in a similar scenario, let's say you've got a crisis going on, your one of the primary applications is down. You've got a few stakeholders on the line. So how would you communicate to the stakeholders about the crisis, that they are not able to access the application, probably their transactions are pending? How would you distribute your teamwork? So let's say you've got a team of 6 people. How would you distribute the team to actually work on resolving the issue, doing the communications? Would you distribute half and half? What are the top priorities that you would consider if there is a crisis happening?
So actually, we had this kind of scenario in Accenture, and our client was also a bank in UK. So what we did was, like, we would all gather on the call, and it was like during Corona time. So we were all like dispersed at our home location, so we had to get on the call. One person, like I was the team lead, so I was in charge of communications. So I would send the mailers to the impacted stakeholders, and telling them that we are working on it and it will be resolved hopefully in 2 hours, because that's our SLA. And like the other person, like we would distribute the work, other person would start looking into the logs, two people would start looking into the logs, other two would go on like on the research mode, why application might not be running, and if we need help with the other team, so like we would have that cross-functional collaboration with the developer team from the vendor side, actually from the client side, because they were also involved in the application building. So we would all get together, and if there's any issue with the application, so two people will go on the application, other two on the infrastructure, and two people on the logs, and I would handle the communications. And yeah, we would, because of this even work distribution, we were pretty quick in resolving the issues, actually. We had like 2 escalations in 1.5 years.
Okay. All right. I think I'm almost towards the end of the interview. Just one question. Tell me about a time where you influenced your team to do something new or something innovative, or you brought a change in some process which helped the team.
Sure. So like we always what we used to do as a team was we would have our daily scrum every day, but on Fridays we would have brainstorming sessions. So if anybody in the team thought that any of the process was too manual or too long to handle, so we would do automation for that process. So what we did for like in one instance was that to minimize on our cost in the startups, to minimize on our cost, and when we were only manually operating our infrastructure, we integrated our the start and stop of our EC2 instances with our Lambda functions. And the Lambda functions, they were linked to the Slack. So one command on the Slack by any of the developers, like start EC2 dev. So that would start our instance in the AWS console. So, and they could also stop it. So when one developer is working on it, he can start and he can stop. So that would reduce our cost. And when the other is working, so start and stop again. So that helped us in reducing our cost in the non-production environment, actually. Production was always up and running, but for non-production, we were able to cut the cost.
Sure. Okay. Cool. I think I'm done with the interview, Jagdeep. Thank you for your time today. And I'll pause the recording and then I'll give you the feedback.
Sure.
Thank you.
Thank you.